For Pacifica Radio, I'm Scott Baba. The Senate early this morning passed a $95.3 billion aid package for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, pushing ahead after months of difficult negotiations and amid growing political divisions in the Republican Party over the role of the United States abroad. The vote came after a small group of Republicans opposed to the $60 billion for Ukraine held the Senate floor through the night, using the final hours of debate to argue that the U.S. should focus on its own problems before sending more money overseas. Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama said Republicans were holding firm in their opposition.
In December, all of 49 Republicans voted to defeat similar legislation because it did nothing for our southern border. Senate Republicans were unanimous. We had a consensus in the Republican conference that we should not give more money to other countries until we secured our southern border. I still believe that. My position has not changed since December.
Independent Senator Kristen Sinema of Arizona criticized her GOP colleagues for letting former President Donald Trump kill the bipartisan border deal she helped negotiate earlier.
Less than 24 hours after we released the bill, my Republican colleagues changed their minds. It turns out border security is not actually a risk to our national security. It's just a talking point for the election.
Ultimately, 22 Republicans voted with nearly all Democrats to pass the package, 70-29. Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer worked closely with Republican Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell on the legislation and argued that abandoning Ukraine could embolden Russian President Vladimir Putin and threaten national security across the globe.
It's time to finish the job and get this critical bill passed. If we want the world to remain a safe place for freedom, for democratic principles, for American prosperity, then elected leaders need to put in the work to make that happen. We need to approve the investments that ensure our people's security, ensure the security of our partners, and prevent our adversaries from gaining an edge over us.
The bill's passage through the Senate was a welcome sign for Ukraine amid critical shortages on the battlefield. Still, the package faces a deeply uncertain future in the House, where hardline Republicans aligned with Donald Trump continue to oppose the legislation. Speaker Mike Johnson cast new doubt on the package in a statement made last night before the vote, making clear that it could be weeks or months before Congress sends the legislation to President Joe Biden's desk, if ever. Two officials say Israel and Hamas are making progress towards a deal that aims to bring about a ceasefire and to free hostages held in the war-ravaged Gaza Strip. Key meetings continue today between the sides in the Egyptian capital of Cairo. The talks are moving forward even after Israel intensified its offensive in the southern Gaza town of Rafah, from where it freed 2 hostages but killed at least 74 Palestinians, according to local health officials. The Egyptian and Western officials said gaps remain between Israel and Hamas, but progress is being made. They spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the sensitive talks with the media. Meanwhile, the South African government said today it lodged a, quote, urgent request with the International Court of Justice to consider whether Israel's military operations targeting the southern Gaza city of Rafah constitutes a breach of the court's provisional orders, which they handed down in the genocide case last month. The request asked the UN court to determine whether Israel's indication that it would launch a ground offensive in Rafah, where 1.4 million Palestinians from elsewhere in war-battered Gaza have fled to escape fighting, represents a, quote, further imminent breach of the rights of Palestinians in Gaza. According to a statement released by the Office of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, the African country is also asking the court in the Netherlands to consider further provisional measures against Israel. South Africa alleges that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people in its war against Gaza's militant Hamas group. The United Nations top court handed down a preliminary ruling last month in the case, issuing 6 orders, including asking Israel to do all it can to prevent the deaths of Palestinian civilians and the destruction of Gaza. Having failed to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas the first time, House Republicans are determined to try again. But it's not at all certain today's scheduled do-over will produce a better tally. The evening vote is expected to be tight, even with the arrival of Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who has been away from Washington for cancer care. Speaker Mike Johnson's threadbare majority cannot spare defections or absences in the face of staunch Democratic opposition to impeaching Mayorkas. After last week's embarrassing setback, Republicans are trying to make good on their priorities as they criticize the Biden administration's handling of the record numbers of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. I'm Scott Baba for Pacifica Radio.